Okay, I'm going to be performing the pre-trip state inspection. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to make sure that I have enough air. To do that, I'm going to start the engine by doing a safety start. Make sure the truck is in neutral. My brakes are engaged. I'll press my clutch and I'll start the vehicle. Okay, while the air is building up, I'm going to go ahead and do my in-cab inspection. First thing I want to check is my seat belt. I want to check to make sure that my seat belt is not frayed, it's not ripped, not damaged in any way. It's properly secured to the vehicle, and it latches correctly. There's no damage to any parts of the seat belt. I'm going to check my gauges. My oil gauge is functioning properly. It is to the proper level. I'm going to check my temperature gauge, make sure my temperature gauge is rising. I'm going to check my air gauges to make sure that my air gauges are up to the proper level between 100 and 120 psi. I'm going to check my voltmeter to make sure that my voltmeter is also charging correctly. I'm going to check my defroster, make sure my defroster is working correctly. I'm going to check my windshield wipers. My windshield wipers are functioning properly. My windshield washer is also functioning correctly. I'm going to make sure that my blades are not damaged. They're properly secured, and overall no damage. My windshields are clean. They're not cracked. No stickers that obstruct my view. My mirrors are also clean and they are properly adjusted. No stickers or no damage to the mirrors. My safety equipment. I have a properly charged, stored, and rated fire extinguisher. I have 3 emergency triangles in the jump box, and I have spare electrical fuses. I have enough air in my system, so I can now go ahead and operate my or perform my brake inspection checks. I'm going to shut off my engine. I'm going to release my trailer brakes and my parking brakes. Once the system settles, I can begin my test, and I still have over 100 psi, so I can begin my test. I'm going to apply the foot brake and hold it for 1 minute to make sure that my vehicle, because this is a combination, should not leak more than 4 psi. While I'm checking this, I'm going to go ahead and turn on my key as well to perform the next test. Okay, it's been a minute and I have not lost more than 4 psi. The next part of the test, I'm going to check to make sure that my low air warning system comes on, and that should come on before the system reaches 60 psi. My system is on, my low air warning system is on, and it is above 60 psi. The next part of the test, I'm going to perform the emergency brakes, so I will continue fanning my brakes. And both of my emergency brakes came on, tractor and trailer, and they are on at about 30 psi. Now I'm going to restart my truck by performing again a safety start, neutral, brakes engaged, apply my foot brake, and start the engine. I'm going to complete my in-cab inspection. I noticed that the ABS light came on and off, so it is functioning properly. My horns are functioning correctly. My left turn signal and my right turn signal indicators are all functioning properly. 4-way flasher indicators are also functioning properly. and my high beam indicator is also functioning correctly. I'm going to wait till the system builds up to about right under 120 psi, and I will notify you when it reaches that point. In the meantime, I would also be checking my lights to make sure that my headlights are functioning properly. The high beams are also functioning correctly. My left turn signal and my right turn signal are both functioning correctly, as are my four-way flashers and my brake lights. I want to make sure that my lights on the rear of the vehicle are red and that they are amber everywhere else. I'm going to check my clearance lights, make sure that my clearance lights are functioning correctly. Again, amber on the front and red on the rear. We'll be able to hear the air governor cut out shortly. Air compressor just cut out just below 120 psi. I'm now going to shut off my engine and I'm going to move to my engine compartment checks. Begin on the passenger side. On the passenger side, I want to check my oil level to make sure that the oil level is at the proper level. My coolant level is also at the proper level. I'm going to check my alternator to make sure that my alternator is securely mounted to the vehicle, not missing any nuts or bolts. All the wires are properly connected and I'm not showing any signs of burnt or loose wires. No damage to any of the wires attached to the alternator. The alternator is belt driven. It is operating properly and not damaged. I'm going to check to make sure that my fan belts, the fan belts are not damaged, they're not frayed, cut, or showing any signs of wear, and that they deflect between 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to check my water pump. I'm going to make sure that my water pump is properly secured to the vehicle. There's not missing any nuts or bolts. It is gear driven. It is not leaking. It is working properly and it is not damaged. We'll go to the other side. On this side of the vehicle, I'm going to check my power steering reservoir to make sure that this is at the proper level. I'm going to check my hoses to make sure that my hoses are not leaking, they're not damaged, they're not missing any hose clamps. Same thing with my radiator, making sure that my radiator hoses are properly attached, no missing clamps, they're not bulging, not showing any signs of leakage. I'm going to check my power steering pump. My power steering pump is gear driven. It is properly attached to the vehicle. It is not leaking. It is working properly and not damaged. I'm going to check my air compressor to make sure that my air compressor is properly attached to the vehicle, not missing any nuts or bolts. It is not leaking. No signs of oil leakage, and I do not hear any air leaking either. It is, again, gear driven, working properly, and not damaged. Now I'm going to be checking my steering gearbox. My steering gearbox is properly attached to the vehicle. It's not missing any nuts or bolts. It is not cracked or broken. It is not leaking. My steering linkage. My steering linkage is, again, properly attached to the vehicle, not missing any nuts or bolts or cotter keys. It is properly lubricated and no damage to the joints. On my suspension system, I'm going to check to make sure that my springs are not cracked, missing, or broken, and they have not shifted. I'm going to check my spring hangers to make sure that my spring hangers are properly connected to the vehicle. They are not cracked, broken, no parts missing, not missing any nuts or bolts, and the bushings are not damaged. I'm going to check my U-bolts to make sure that my U-bolts are present. They are properly connected. They are not loose. They're not cracked, broken, or missing. Now I'm going to be checking my brake lines. I'm going to make sure that my brake lines are properly secured to the vehicle, not missing any clamps. They have no holes. They're not ripped. They're not frayed. They're not rubbing on anything. From there, I'm going to check my brake chamber. My brake chamber is not missing any clamps. It is properly connected to the vehicle. It is not leaking. From there, I'm going to move to my slack adjuster. My slack adjuster is not cracked, broken. It is not missing any parts, not missing any cotter keys. It is properly lubricated. And if this is a manual slack adjuster, if I pull by hand, it should not pull more than 1 inch. Continuing with my brake checks, I'm going to check to make sure that my brake drums do not have any holes, not cracks, it's not broken, it's not missing any bolts. My linings are not worn dangerously thin, and neither the drum or the linings are contaminated with grease or oil. I'm going to check my tires. I'm going to make sure that all my steer tires have at least 2 30 seconds of tread depth in every major groove. The rear tires on this vehicle should have a minimum of 2 30 seconds tread depth in every major groove. I'm going to check to make sure that there's no damage to the sidewall or the tread. The sidewall does not have any bulges, cuts, or abrasions. I'm going to check my my rim to make sure that my rim does not have any cracks, no welds, no bends on the flange. I'm going to check my valve stem. My valve stem is not cracked, broken, or missing. It is not damaged. I'm going to check for proper inflation, and to check the proper inflation, I have to use I'll be using my tire gauge. So I have to make sure that I'm using my tire gauge to make sure that I'm at the proper level. On my lug nuts, I want to make sure that all my lug nuts are present, none are missing. It has no rust streaks or black marks coming from the lug nuts, indicating that that might be loose. There are no cracks emanating from the bolt holes, and the bolt holes are not distorted. I'm going to check my hub oil to make sure that my hub oil is not leaking and it's at the proper fill marks. Okay, from here I'm going to continue with my vehicle. I'm going to check my doors to make sure that my doors open and close correctly. There's no damage to the seals. Seals are intact. My hinges are not damaged or broken. They're operating properly. My mirrors are properly adjusted. The mounting brackets are not missing any nuts, bolts, or clamps, and everything is secure. Moving to my fuel tanks. I'm going to make sure that my fuel tanks, first the cap is tight. Okay. Make sure my cap is tight. Let me make sure that my fuel tanks are properly secured to the vehicle. They are not missing any nuts or bolts and not leaking. And come back to the engine compartment, and I'm going to check underneath the vehicle to make sure that there are no puddles of oil, coolant, or fuel. It indicates that there might be leaks from the engine compartment. I'll be coming over here this way. I'm going to be checking my frame. Make sure that my long frames are not cracked, damaged, or broken. There are no broken welds. I'm going to check my cross members to make sure that my cross members are all present. None are missing. They're not cracked, broken, and they're not missing any bolts. I'll be checking my driveline to make sure that my driveline is not bent, cracked, or broken. It's properly lubricated. There are no foreign objects wrapped around the U-joints or the driveline itself. I'm going to check my exhaust system to make sure that my exhaust system is not cracked, broken, not showing any signs of soot that could indicate leakage. It is properly secured to the vehicle and not missing any clamps, nuts, or bolts. I'm going to check my air lines to make sure that my air lines are not crimped, they're not cut, they're not rubbing on anything, they're not showing any threads, not damaged in any way, and that they're properly secured to the vehicle. My electrical line, make sure that my electrical line is securely connected to the trailer. It is not showing any wires. No wires are exposed. It is not cut. It is not taped together, not spliced, not rubbing on anything, not damaged. Next, I'm going to move to my tractor suspension system, and I would be checking my hangers and my springs and my shock absorbers the same as I would in the front. The difference here is that I would be checking my airbags to make sure that my airbags are properly inflated and that they're not leaking. My tires, I would check my tires the same as I would on the front. I would check my wheels the same as I did on the front axle. My axle seals to make sure that they're not leaking the same as I did on the front. On the brake system, I would be checking my air lines, my brake chamber, my slack adjuster, my linings, and my drums the same as I did on the front. I'm going to be checking my coupling system, and here I'm going to be checking my frame to make sure that my frame is properly secured to the vehicle. It is not cracked, it's not missing any nuts or bolts, and again properly attached. I'm going to check my fifth wheel to make sure that my fifth wheel is properly lubricated, not missing any parts. Make sure that the release bar is locked in place. Make sure that it is properly lubricated. And I would look from the back into the locking jaws to make sure that the locking jaws are wrapped around the kingpin. I'm going to check my trailer apron to make sure that there's no damage to the trailer apron, no holes, no cracks. I'm going to be checking the remainder of my trailer floor to make sure that all of my cross members are present. None are missing, cracked, or broken. I would be checking my torque arm to make sure that my torque arm, which is right here, this is my torque arm. I want to make sure that my torque arm is not cracked, broken, damaged, or missing, and that the bushings are not damaged as well. I'm going to be checking my mud flaps to make sure that my mud flaps are present and they're not damaged, they're not cut. I'm going to go to my landing gear. My landing gear is fully raised, not missing any nuts or bolts, properly attached. It does not have any cracks, not broken, and none of the bars are broken or missing or have any missing nuts or bolts. I'm going to check to make sure that my handle is properly secured and stored in place. I'll make sure that all of my reflective tape is proper in the proper places, in the proper color, which is white and red all the way around the trailer, wherever it needs to be. I'll come back to my trailer. On my trailer, I'm going to check to make sure that my sliding pins are locked in place, and that my release lever is also locked in place. I'm going to be checking my suspension system and to make sure that my springs, U-bolts, mount hangers are checked the same way as I did on the front. I'm going to check my braking system, which would include my airlines, my slack adjuster, my airlines, my brake chambers, the slack adjuster, the brake linings, and the brake drums, the same as I did on the front. The tires, I would check the tires the same as I did on the front. The wheels, the lug nuts, and the axle seals and lubrication, the oil, and the inflation, I would check the same as I did on the front. The mud flaps on the trailer, I would check the same as I did on the front. We go around the rear of the trailer. On the rear of the trailer, I would check to make sure that all of my hinges are in their proper place, that none are cracked, broken, none are missing. Check to make sure that my seals for the rear door are intact and that they open and close securely. And that conducts the pre-trip inspection test.